and welcome back to our podcast. I'm the Disturbed Southern Belle.
And I'm the gentleman.
We're continuing our series talking about some of the most disturbing media. We're still continuing on with a few more books. In this episode, I'm going to be covering a couple that are just atrocious. But anyway, the first one is a little one called Bastard Out of Carolina. Now, this 1992 novel is written by Dorothy Allison, and it's written from the perspective of a girl who's named Ruth Ann Boatwright, but she's known as Bone. That's her nickname. So we'll start with synopsis here. This book opens with Bone talking about the details of her birth. Her mother, Annie, who was 15 at the time, ends up giving birth to her after being severely injured in a car accident. Her mother is unmarried and is essentially comatose during the birth, and Bone's Aunt Ruth and her mother then, later on after Bone is born, try to give a false name for Bone's father. However, their deception is found out and the child is declared a bastard. The words illegitimate are then stamped in big red letters on the child's birth certificate. Annie, who hates being referred to as trash, then spends the next 2 years petitioning to get a new birth certificate issued for the girl. Her mother is also, of course, ridiculed and looked down on by the patrons of the diner where she works and the town where she lives. Then at 17, Annie marries a man named Lyle Parson, and they end up having another daughter who they name Reese. Now, soon after, sadly, Lyle is killed in a car accident, which leaves Annie distraught. Bone describes her mother as being all bitter grief and hunger. Annie remains single for a few years, and then she begins to date a man named Glenn Waddell. Now, he is the son of this prominent dairy farmer in the area, and the pair marry a couple of years later after Annie becomes again pregnant. Now, while she's in labor with Glenn's child, Glenn waits in the car with Reese and Bone. He then molests Bone for the first time. Annie then gives birth to a stillborn baby boy and is told that she will not be able to have any more children. But honestly, once you hear the end of the story, it's probably not a bad thing. So the family begins to struggle financially due to Glenn's inability to hold a job, due to his frequent angry outbursts. Now, during this time, he also begins to physically abuse Bone, which includes several beatings that often leave her covered in numerous bruises. Annie eventually discovers the abuse and she leaves him. However, he promises to change and never do it again, which leads her to take him back.
Because of course it does.
Of course it does. Now, as imagined, the abuse just immediately resumes. Then, Annie's brothers, who are known to be hard drinking and tough, they discover the abuse to Bone, and they beat Glenn to a bloody pulp.
Good.
Which leads Annie to, again, leave him. But Bone then tells Annie that she will never live in the same house with Glenn again. She tells her mother that she loves her and that she'll even forgive her if she decides to go back to him. However, she is firm that she's not going to go back. She's not living with him anymore. So Annie vows that she will not return to Glenn unless Bone goes with her. So Glenn finds out about this and he seeks Bone out. He finds her home alone at her aunt's house and he attacks her, breaking her arm and essaying her on the kitchen floor of her aunt's home. Annie comes in during the attack and fights him off her daughter. Annie and Bone then flee the house to her car outside, and Glenn then follows her with his pants still down around his ankles, begging her to kill him rather than leave him. Bone is then disgusted when Annie ends up crying and throwing herself into Glenn's arms, and the two leave together. Bone's aunt takes her to the hospital and then ends up taking custody of the girl. While she is at her aunt's house recovering, her mother shows up, and presents her with a new birth certificate without the words illegitimate stamped on it. She begs her daughter to forgive her, and then she just leaves, eventually ends up leaving without telling her where she's going. So where do you think she's going?
Probably back to him.
There you go.
Yeah.
But now there's a movie. Excuse me. There's a movie of this, and it depicts it very vividly, and it is
disgusting.
It's disgusting, but sadly, this happens a lot, and it's not a bad book or movie, just in the sense that she does get some hope at the end. You know what I'm saying? She does, get away, blah, blah, blah. But it's terrible.
It is.
Now, the next little book we're going to cover is one called Tampa. Now, this 2013 novel by Lissa Nutting follows a middle school teacher named Celeste Price who grooms and molests one of her young male students. So, this one is odd in that, usually it's the other way around more often than not when these things are depicted in books. So, it is kind of odd to see it from the woman's perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But not that it makes it any better. It absolutely does not. But, it's just a twist on it that you don't normally see. So Celeste Price is a 26-year-old woman who is a secret hebephile. Now, this is a person that has a sexual attraction to young adolescent children that are typically between the ages of like 11 and 14. So not like kids, but horribly bad enough. She is married to this alcoholic police officer named Ford, who is from a wealthy family. She's unhappy in her marriage with Ford, and she decides to pursue a new career that will allow her to have easy access to young boys. The story opens just before her first day as an English teacher at Jefferson Junior High School, where she intends to groom a student. She chooses this boy named Jack Patrick because he's this shy student and she thinks he'll be, easy to manipulate. So while teaching the class, she repeatedly directs classroom discussions towards sexual matters. She then begins to groom Jack by keeping him after class to discuss the book that their story they're reading, Romeo and Juliet, blah, blah, blah. She then discovers Jack's home address and she drives to the boy's home. She hides in her car, and while doing so, she decides she's going to pleasure herself while she's watching him through the window, just doing mundane tasks like anybody would be at their house doing, just walking around doing whatever. One night, while she was watching him, she sees him pleasuring himself while he's in his bedroom. So the next day, she keeps him after class and tells him that she happened to be in the area where his house was and that she saw what he did. He is understandably embarrassed by this, but she confesses that she's attracted to him, which leads the two to begin a relationship. A week later, Celeste picks Jack up at his home, and Jack's father is a divorced man named Buck, and that's who he lives with. He only lives with his father at this point. He tells his father that he's going to work on a school project, and she takes him off, and that night she basically molests him for the first time. Jack and Celeste begin meeting at Jack's house while his father's at work, and Celeste lays out these strict rules for their relationship, which include that he can't take any pictures of her, like provocative pictures, you might say, or anything that would, make it look like anything was going on.
Yeah.
He also can only communicate with her using this burner phone that she gives him. He's never to call her using his regular cell phone, blah, blah, blah. So the relationship quickly becomes strained as Jack wants a more emotional connection with Celeste. However, she's only interested in him physically. He begins to write poetry for Celeste and asks her to tell him that she loves him. He then begins to insinuate that they can be together publicly once he turns 18, but the thought of this is revolting to her because she doesn't want an older boy.
Yeah.
One day, Jack's father comes home earlier than expected from work and begins to flirt with Celeste. Jack then suggests that Celeste should attempt to seduce him, as this would allow them to spend more time together because she could stay over and things like, whatever. Celeste then begins to lead Buck into believing that she's interested in him. However, she's not sleeping with him or anything. She's just flirting with him and making him think, there's going to be something. So Buck ends up giving Celeste a spare key to his house, which allows her to visit Jack more frequently. Later, Jack is going to visit his mother in Tampa and while on Christmas vacation, and he tells Celeste that he feels threatened by Buck's interest in her, but she finds this just humorous. Now, so during the spring semester after he comes back home, Buck again returns home early from work. So to distract him, she finally relents and she ends up sleeping with him, which she describes as causing her to vomit during the incident because it was so revolting to be with an adult male. Ugh. Jack ends up seeing the two together and he runs off. Now, Celeste is, at the time, she's not able to stop him and she's unable to speak with him or explain to him why she done what she done. And that later that night, he calls her repeatedly, but she ignores his calls. Before class the next day, she starts becoming paranoid that maybe Buck had been bribing Jack into manipulating her that night, like calling her or whatever, or that perhaps Jack had killed his father in a fit of rage. However, Jack arrives at school and he's angry with her, believing that she had just really wanted Buck all along. So, desperate to convince him that she's not interested in Buck, she coerces him into this sexual act. Later, Jack takes a nude photo of her, which is against her rules. However, she allows him to keep the photo because she just plans to take his phone later and delete it. The pair continue their relationship, though Jack is becoming increasingly fearful of being discovered. Celeste then proposes that they drug Buck, to which Jack reluctantly agrees. She then spikes Buck's drink and drags him to his bedroom, and then molests Jack in front of his father's unconscious body. Buck later again returns home unexpectedly and finds Jack and Celeste together, and this is later on, of course, which causes him to suffer a heart attack. Celeste just coldly watches the man die, making no attempt to help him. And then later on, she tells Jack, a little bit later, she tells Jack about what had happened, and he becomes distraught and he runs away from home. While he's gone, she attempts to find the photo that was taken of her, but she's unable to find him. He then later returns back to the home, and she ends up taking the burner phone and sneaking it out with her and taking it with her. She thinks the phone, that she's got the picture now. After 2 weeks of not returning to school, Jack finally phones Celeste and asks her to visit him after school. She reluctantly agrees, and then while there, he tells her that after the school year ends, he'll be moving to live with his mother. Jack then claims that the pair had murdered Buck, but Celeste argues with him, but really in her heart, she kind of feels like it's probably true.
Yeah.
So, over the summer vacation, Jack manages to visit Celeste occasionally. However, she is growing tired of him and his emotional troubles, which she's the whole cause of, pretty much all of them. But anyway, she then, of course, starts planning to end the relationship. Her husband's new work schedule allows her to remain home at more as she wants to avoid him, so he's away more, which makes it harder to avoid Jack. She then begins to fantasize about new students and starting a new relationship with one of them. When the school year starts, she begins to groom another boy named Boyd. However, Boyd is not shy like Jack, and she becomes concerned about his ability to keep their secret, so to speak. However, this doesn't deter her from pursuing the boy. And Boyd's parents, they're still married, which leads the pair to often meet at Buck's now abandoned house. So after he died, no one's living there now, but it's still got stuff in it and stuff. So she continues a relationship with Jack as well. However, neither boy is aware of this. During one of her encounters with Boyd at Buck's house, Jack suddenly appears. He attacks Boyd and inflicts a severe wound to the boy's head, and then he berates Celeste for abandoning him. He then flees the house, which causes her to grab a knife and chase after him. After all this racket, commotion, whatever, somebody's called the cops. The police arrive to find her running out of the house naked, covered in Boyd's blood. So they take her into custody. Now, during their investigation, they discover the nude photo of her on Jack's SIM card, which leads her to believe, something's going on. Ford's family, which was her husband, they hire an attorney who then disrupts the interrogation that's going on, and she is told that she must publicly apologize to her husband for her infidelity, and she's also offered $15,000 if she'll cry while she's doing it on TV by the lawyer. The case just becomes a media circus, as you can imagine. Celeste paints herself as this young, innocent woman that was just desperate for attention, and during her trial, her defense argues that she's too pretty to go to prison.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
great
the thing.
defense.
Yeah. Boyd and Jack are called to testify, and Boyd's testimony makes it sound like the relationship was consensual. And maybe in his mind it was, but he's not on to who consent, but you get what I'm saying. Jack, however, he tearfully answers questions, and Celeste is just disgusted by his more mature appearance. She hasn't saw him in about a year during this time when she was being, held or whatever. And he looks older, more mature, so I'm guessing he's probably getting to be around 13, 14, maybe 15, so he looks too old for her. The next day, she's offered a plea deal in which she will be on probation for 4 years. She also cannot go near a school or be left unsupervised with a minor, as well as being forced to attend group therapy.
Reasonable.
So, just really good punishment here.
Awful.
It is. A year later, she's given permission to move to another town. She then gets this kind of under-the-table job at a cabana where she just works under a fake name. So basically, she's getting paid cash, so there's really no way to trace her. She continues to assault more boys whose families are visiting the area. And then she continues to fantasize about Boyd and Jack, though she's repulsed with the idea that they are now maturing and probably older boys now. So in order to remain aroused by their memory, she imagines that on the night that Jack discovered her with Boyd, that Boyd died from his injuries and that she manages to kill Jack before the police arrive. And then it ends. What a twisted woman.
That's just a fuster-cluck of a story.
It is. And what's even worse is in a lot of cases, these little boys that get stuff like this done to them, people act like it, oh, well, yeah, as a boy, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
No,
it's not okay. This is an adult taking advantage of a child. I don't care if it's boy or girl.
Regardless of what people say, it's just as bad as if the victim is a girl.
And especially if she's somewhat attractive. That just even smooths it over even more. And that's sick.
It is.
But
Very
anyway,
much so.
we hope you enjoyed those. Just to know some more about some of the more disturbing stories in this world. We hope you enjoyed the segment. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to stay disturbed.